Welcome to Better Podcasting, a show where we talk about podcast tips, tools, and best practices to help you succeed with your podcast. What makes us different? Well, just like you, we podcast purely out of the love and fun of it. Podcasting is our hobby, and we recognize that it's yours too. We always encourage your questions and feedback, and you can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. Here's your host for the show, Stephen John Drew and Stargate Pioneer.
Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Better Podcasting. I'm Stephen John Drew, and of course, with me today is Stargate Pioneer. What's going on, SP?
Just enjoying the great weather outside, and it's just a good time because I knew that tonight we were going to be recording Better Podcasting.
Very, very true. Very true. And this is going to be the second official episode of Better Podcasting. And as we mentioned last time, we are continuing our series on the basics of podcasting. If you did not listen to the last episode, just to recap what we're going to be doing for the first 5 or 6, we're going to go through some of the basics as far as setup of a podcast goes, so that you do have your foundation in place. And then after that, we're going to switch the format a little bit up so that we end up bringing in a little more listener feedback. But for now, we are doing this little series. We're also pleased today to announce that we are debuting what will be our ongoing segment covering something current, and you'll just have to wait till the end of the show to find out about that.
Absolutely. Podcasting is fun. Hobby podcasting is fun. And we're excited to be doing this podcast, but we know you're excited to do your podcast. Once you figured out your topic, then we got to figure out what to do next. How are you going to set up to record? And we're going to let you know that one step at a time. So hang on, folks.
For sure. Well, should we just go ahead and get right into the points that we have there today, SP?
Sounds like a good idea to me. I mean, the first one is pretty... You got to have one of them, and if you don't have one, then you can't really do a podcast because there's no way to record your voice.
For sure, and that's something that we're talking about: microphones. Microphones are going to be a necessity if you're planning on doing a podcast.
Just a little bit, and yes, you can podcast. You can start with... Yes, this is an iPhone or any smartphone, really. It doesn't have to be an iPhone. You could start with doing recording off the earbuds or whatever. But if you want to get really good sound, if you want to have a niche up on your competition, we talked about competition, so it's not really competition because podcasters are friendly, but it is somebody else that they might go listen to because your audio isn't as good as it can be. So it's not going to be that expensive. Yes, Stephen has a very expensive mic in front of him. I have not as expensive, but more expensive mic in front of me. However, we both have done great using a little bit less expensive microphone, which we're about to tell you about.
Yes, and what I want to start off with here is giving you a bit of an idea about the two different types of microphones that you can get, or the two main types of microphones, I should say. And there's the difference between what's called a condenser and a dynamic microphone. Now, a dynamic microphone is something that has a small field, essentially, of pickup, and then a condenser is something that has it's a larger diaphragm, I guess you would call it, that picks up pretty much everything around you, and the dynamic one is more refined. Now, if you look at studios, like music studios, things like that, they tend to use condenser microphones. However, look past that microphone and what you'll see is a lot of soundproofing. So that's something that you might want to consider when you are shopping microphones. With a dynamic microphone, more than likely, you're not going to pick up all of the surroundings around you. Yes, you'll get a little bit, depending on how loud those things are. If my kid was out the door right there yelling, you would absolutely hear that. But not anywhere near as much as you would hear on a condenser microphone, because really, a condenser will probably pick up the train going down the tracks 3 blocks down.
Think of it this way. You're listening to a radio station, right? A lot of people listen to the radio on the way to work, on the way home, whatever, or you have in your lifetime. Maybe you switched over to podcasts all the time. Yay, congratulations. But so you're listening to the radio and they're in studio in the morning. You're driving to work. You're listening to the morning crew, whatever, or the news or whatever. And you're listening to the radio announcers in studio and you hear pretty crystal clear sound, right? They might be using a dynamic, they might be using a condenser, it doesn't really matter. The purposes for this is go to a live situation. Like it's Saturday morning, they're at the car dealer, or they're at the music store, or they're at some place and they're doing a live event. You hear the crowd in the background. Okay. So to isolate the vacuum going off in the room next door, the TV, or the kids playing, or the trucks going by on the freeway, a dynamic cardioid microphone at home is probably going to be your best bet for home solutions. Now, if you're a voiceover artist, you might want to do a condenser, but then you're going to have to isolate the sound and do proofing in your room or whatever. But we're talking for hobby podcasting here, which is what we do. Yay! Yeah. For hobby podcasting, a dynamic cardioid microphone is what you want.
Yeah. And yes, I am using a dynamic microphone. Yes, SP is using a dynamic microphone, but I have experimented with a condenser. I admit that now. If you go back and you look at some of the photos of me doing podcasting over the years, yes, there was a condenser. I did that purely out of interest on finding out what it was like and things like that. And you will see that it did not last very long before I went back to my dynamic, because people very, very much underestimate how much that condenser does pick up. So it is something that wholeheartedly I do recommend, a dynamic microphone. And best of all, there's a couple of mics that SP and I are going to talk about today, which are probably cheaper than your cheapest condenser mic too.
Yeah, if you're talking about cost, there is no second guess. There is only two microphones that are really touted, maybe three, because there's three versions of it, that people will recommend for beginning podcasters for a lot of different reasons. They sound great. They're both USB and XLR compatible, and they're dynamic cardioid. So what do we got, Stephen?
All right. So the first one that we have is what's called the Audio-Technica ATR 2100. Now, this one here is a USB/XLR dynamic cardioid microphone. This is the little brother of the two Audio-Technica microphones. It is something that you actually see it behind me right there. That is it. And it is, if you're looking at American prices, SP knows them a little bit better. SP, how much does that run there?
You can get it on sale nowadays for about $40. There was a time that you could get them for $30, $35, but generally on sale, you can get them for about $40, which is amazing for the quality of a microphone that it really is.
Yep. And in Canada, you're probably looking around the $70, $80 range. Just depends on where you live. Just less availability up here, but still very, very reasonable for a microphone like that. Now, what's nice about that, I mentioned it's USB and XLR. So XLR is a analog, wired type of signal that you plug into like a soundboard or something like that. Usually you will need a preamp, something that we'll cover a little bit later, but it also has that USB function, which is great. The USB allows you to plug a USB cable into the bottom and then plug the other end into your computer, Mac and Windows compatible. And often, actually, the machines don't even need a driver. So that's really, really beneficial to the microphone. You can just pick it up, plug in the USB cable, and you're good to go. You don't need any of that other expensive equipment. So that's really handy. The big brother to this is what's called the Audio-Technica AT2005 USB, and it is a black microphone, so it looks a little bit different, a little sleeker in my opinion. The grill, I like it a little bit better as well. The switch is a little bit softer, less of a less clicky. Yeah. I don't know what you want to.
It's flat and it's conformal to the body of the microphone as well.
Yeah, and that's this guy right behind me here, there. That one is the AT2005, and it is what's deemed the professional. They use the term professional, but the higher end is what the podcasting circles call it.
The sound quality you're going to get out of either the microphone is basically the same. Yeah. the best thing that we could figure out after taking them apart and looking at them on the inside is that the AT2005 might have a little bit more padding foam around the diaphragm on the top of the microphone. So a little bit better on the plosives, a little bit better maybe on the wind noise if you're outside or something like that. But it is basically, it's the same sound card. It's the same guts of the actual receiver of the sound. And so it's going to sound the same. And if you're on a budget, I'd go with the 2100. I bought the 2005 for my first microphone that I went with of the two, and it is still to this day my favorite microphone. It's in my go bag. I have it available to me wherever I travel to, and I use both the USB and the XLR capabilities with it, and it is an amazing microphone. Love the sound out of it, and I'm glad I have it. And you can get them on sale for around $50. When they go on sale, but they normally go in the $70 to $80 range off of Amazon or any of the other music stores, regular stores that you can get them at.
Yeah, and I used the AT2005 as my primary mic for a little bit, and quite a nice microphone, but I have used the 2100 on the go a couple of times, and they're both very, very similar. Maybe some slight difference in the plastic material, but aside from that, really, I'm not seeing much of a difference, and they're both very, very good microphones. And if you go to YouTube, I actually encourage this. I know we tried to be a good podcasting source of information, or that's our plan here, but look on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and you search up AT2005, because that actually has, I think, a few more head-to-head comparisons than the 2100. If you look that up, there are people who have actually done comparisons of this microphone with some other broadcast standards, and it is amazing how much it can hold its own.
Yeah, it is. It's not quite there, right? It's not going to be the same as a $500 microphone, but it'll get you 80, 90, 95% there, depending on your application. And definitely if you're starting out, I'm guessing you're just going to want to go USB into your computer. I'm just guessing. And if you want to do that, either of those two mics are just amazing in the sound quality you can get with the USB capability. I highly, highly recommend it, and can't say enough about it. It's all over podcasting circles. If you want to start, get an ATR 2100. I would recommend, if you can afford it, the AT 2005, just because it's my favorite out of the two. Color, fit form, and everything. Sound quality, it's the same. I mean, come on. It's you pay for vanity, really.
And the 2005, you get a travel carry bag, I believe. I don't think you get that on the 2100.
And you get the microphone clip, the thing that holds the microphone on the stand, and you get the little stand where it's portable. You can take it anywhere. And the stand's a little wimpy, to be honest with you. But if you're just starting out, if you're just checking out podcasting, if you're guesting on another show for somebody, you can't go wrong with this microphone. When I started podcasting back in 2000, on New Year's Day, 2011, if I would have gone home and if I would have bought one of those, it would have saved so much trouble over the next couple of years. It would have been great. But nobody knew enough to recommend it to me at the time. So yeah, I have one now, and I recommend getting one of those two microphones to anybody that's starting out.
Agreed. And I have a similar story. I actually started off with this guy right here, the Shure SM58. And while that is a good microphone, and a microphone that they often use in the music industry on stage and things like that, there was a bit of issues that I had manipulating the sound, especially in the higher range of things. And I wasn't really happy with it. And I have to say that if I had actually had the AT2005 or the ATR 2100, I highly doubt that I would have began a quest to replace the microphone like I did with the Shure SM58 that led to a bit of a variety of microphones in my possession.
Yeah. It looks a little bit excessive, folks, but we were thinking in terms of starting better podcasting. We were looking at the microphones and we were like, okay, what are we going to recommend? I mean, really, because we had to try them out and go with it itself. So everything you see behind him is in the $100 and below range. And stay tuned for a microphone comparison with all that. But if you're just starting out, again, the Audio-Technica microphones, you can't lose with them. You just can't.
Yeah. Now, assuming that you have decided on a microphone, and it may have been the couple that we recommended, or it might be another one, the next thing that you want to be concerned about is how are you going to place the microphone? Because there's something that I want to show you viewers, and if you are an audio listener, you might want to pop over to the YouTube to see this. SP and I have very different microphone positions right now. Now, there is a reason for that. My microphone is a large diaphragm dynamic microphone, so it's meant to be back like you see it now, several inches away. That's how it should be. But if you look at SP, his microphone is a lot closer to his mouth, and that's something that you tend to have to do when you have the smaller diaphragm dynamic microphone. Correct position is actually, as you will see it with both of us, off to the side a little bit, pointed towards you, not directly on, because if you go directly onto the microphone, that's something that usually you end up getting a lot of plosives. That's your P's, poppings, a bit of S's, hissing, things like that. You will get that a lot more when you're talking directly into the microphone. Having it slightly off is a much better technique.
That's true. It is. And you want to have your mouth somewhere between 2 and 4 inches away. That's really the correct. You don't want to actually have your lips right on the microphone cage, and you don't want to be too far away, because then you're gonna have to jack up the gain and get a lot of room noise around you. Similarly, if you're using a stick mic or a vocal mic like I have, you're gonna need some sort of either a pop filter, or most people that use these type of microphones use a windscreen, a foam windscreen, to go over the top of the cage, and that's what you're at. By the way, I have a Sennheiser E935, which is what I'm using right now, and pretty much all the microphones with this fit form, they're stick microphones, and they pretty much are all the same in terms of what they actually look like when you put them on your microphone stand. So it's good to go there.
And really, they're only a few bucks. For a good one, you're probably looking at about $10 or so.
Like on Amazon, I can't remember. Yeah, on Amazon, I can't remember. It's like $2.95 or $3.95 for one, or $3.65 for one. So that's all you have to pay. Okay, there's one last thing that I want to say in terms of using one of these two microphones that we have recommended. I actually have my ATR 2100 right in front of me, and you can see both the XLR and the USB inputs. But the one thing that I want to say is, if this switch is not in the on position, you are not going to be heard by the other end. So just make sure that you're a lot of these vocal mics. That explains
my first 5 podcasts that I ever did. Now I know.
That's right. So any new podcaster is going to be like, oh man, I can't believe I turned it off. So yeah, I don't actually have an on off with mine. Neither does Steven, but no. A lot of these microphones do have an on off, like a Sennheiser E835 has one, and it'll bug the crap out of you if you actually like, I can't hear myself, what's going on? So just keep that in mind. There's an on off switch.
Yeah, and while that might sound like a really good idea, you might think to yourself, you know what I can do when my co-hosts are talking? I can just go and flip it off. It's not going to work in practice. You will hear the click. Even on the AT2005 with the softer switch, you still hear it. It still gets picked up. So, that might work if you're going to be having a cough or something like that excessively for a bit, and you don't want to ruin the conversation, but you'll just need to know you'll have to go back probably and edit that out, because you will hear the click.
One final thing is, for me at least, if you have a laptop that you are recording on a co-host or directly to, or you're on some sort of a desktop with a webcam or whatever, make sure you do one of these and tap your microphone to make sure that you are actually listening to the microphone that's in front of you and not the webcam or the laptop mic or whatever. So just a little pro tip there.
Very good tip, because that is something that I think many podcasters have encountered, where they've gone and they've recorded it and then they've realized, oh, it wasn't the right mic, because all webcams now pretty much have a built-in mic. So quite often you plug in that camera and Windows switches over to the webcam as the main audio interface.
That's right. And it sounds tinny. It doesn't sound as full as the microphones that you can get, like we were saying before, the ones that we were using. So just hang in there and go through it. Even seasoned podcasters sound like they're using their webcams from time to time. On Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D., we just had that incident last week, and 2 weeks ago we had it on Starling Tribune, and I had to stop the podcast in both cases and say, hey, look, are you using your main mic or are you using your laptop mic or whatever? So,
for sure. And the last tip that I have is not the mic itself, but related to the mic. I encourage you to get a stand that does allow you to put it close to your mouth, because if you use the built-in small one that we talked about with the AT2005, you're going to be hunched over most of the podcast, or you're going to have to turn up that gain and get lots of artifacts. That's not really a good option. You can get a variety of stands. You can get stands that, and we'll talk more about them, but you can get stands that are $10. You can get stands that are $200. Well, actually you can get higher, but for the hobby podcast, you're probably not going much higher. And that is something that, since we are talking microphones and microphone etiquette, the more comfortable you can make yourself as far as getting that mic positioned, the better your sound's going to be. Because I guarantee, if you think that I can stretch this for an hour, you are eventually going to start doing this, and you're going to back up because you're going to start an hour later, get uncomfortable, and next thing you know, you're talking back here. So I do highly encourage you to consider a stand that will work for your environment.
Hey, and all the gear that we're talking about is available. If you want to go check out some stands or shock mounts or microphones, go to betterpodcastinggear.com and you can see all the stuff that we're actually referring to. If there's not an article on it, there will be soon. And if not, just go to the store so you can at least see what we're talking about. So click on the store link at betterpodcasting.com.
For sure. And while we are talking about etiquette, I just want to say, go to betterpodcasting.com, and in the latest episode 2, you will see a link to a great little YouTube video that we did come across about microphone etiquette. It is worth a watch, and hopefully it will help you position your mic so that you can sound the best that you can be.
Absolutely. I did not receive any formal training as far as mic etiquette went, and when I finally saw that video, I'm like, oh, okay, the light bulb went on in my head, so there you go. I just had, get your mouth right on the microphone. Well, that's not exactly how it's supposed to work.
I understand the concept, but no, there's a lot more to it, and definitely worth checking out. It might save you a bit of growing pains.
So definitely. So you've got your microphone, and hopefully you got a stand and shock mount, whatever. We'll talk about that later. But right now, you're excited about getting your podcast out. You want to have some fun. You want to hang out with your folks. You want to build a community or whatever, and you want to get that first episode out. So in order to do that, though, you got to record it.
Yes, that is a very, very valid point. We can get all the microphones we want. We can sit around a table, but if they're plugged into nothing, that's a problem.
It's just slightly. So there's a bunch of different ways you could do it. And we'll talk about all the different ways probably in follow-on episodes, because it can get very complicated. You can use a mixer. You can use a portable digital recorder, which actually I am doing right now. Steven's actually got a sort of a system where he's going into a second PC, and that's working for him. But a lot of people, they just want to record on the equipment they own right now because they don't want to spend a lot of money, and we get that. And so you need to record using the computer that you have.
Yeah. And following up to what we talked about earlier, these microphones, you might plug them directly in USB, so that makes your options a little more limited. Now, there are a couple of ways to do it. If you are planning on doing a live show, you could actually use a service called Hangouts on Air. You actually don't even really need to do it live. You can actually manipulate this. It is a Google service, and what it is essentially everybody gets in the call, and then Google records it. It's primarily video. You can do it audio only. And then later, once it's done, you can just pull and rip the audio right from YouTube. So it's a service that kind of automates it. Now, the trouble with that is that Google Hangouts on Air, while it does have some features where you can kick up the audio, it's not the best quality always. It does vary because it is a video service. It does not carry the same level of audio quality that you would get recording something locally.
That is true. The best sound that you're going to get is to record something locally, whether it's direct into Audacity or using a portable digital recorder or some advanced form of a recorder that's local. That's the best sound that you're going to get, hands down. If you want to take a look at some of the examples of people that use Google Hangouts on Air, you can take a look at All Things Good and Nerdy, which is on the Gonna Geek Network, or Art House Legends has used Hangouts on Air from time to time as well.
Yeah, but from a simplicity standpoint, it is fairly easy to use because it does a lot of the work for you. Now, one thing that I personally recommend over using that is recording it through a program called Audacity.
If everybody records just their own track, you got to figure out how to sync them as well. So that's an issue as well when you only have everybody's individual track and not necessarily anything to reference to. So that is something to consider when just using Audacity to record. Yeah. I will say a lot of people have chosen the Skype system because the audio over Skype has been superior, although things are changing with Google and with other services as well. But a lot of people still do that today. They record over Skype. They start a Skype call with or without video. Without video used to be better audio. Nowadays, as long as you got the throughput back and forth, you're going to get great audio and video quality back and forth as well. And using video while you are recording does allow you to use nonverbal cues to hand over to your co-host.
Exactly. And the thing with Skype that's really nice about it all is that you can get software recorders that tie into Skype so that it is doing the recording for you locally. So it is making sure that you get your track recorded locally rather than Hangouts on Air, which is something that everybody is going to be recorded using the signal going out to Google, which means it won't be your local signal. Now, we've talked about that quite a bit here, and that's something that I want to explain further. There is a difference between recording a signal locally on your computer and recording it remotely, because what happens when you record it remotely through Skype or Google Hangouts or any of these other services, there is a level of what's called compression. Essentially, it is trying to save bandwidth, so you're losing some data in there. And what happens is you end up not getting as crisp or clean of a signal. Sometimes these services actually have a bit of processing on their own to help try to quote unquote clean it up, but it doesn't necessarily execute either. And sometimes you listen to the results and you're wondering what happens. So the best signal that you can get is recording locally, as SP did mention. And that's what's nice about using the Skype recorder, because you are going to end up getting at least your microphone recorded locally.
So yeah, there's a lot of different Skype recorders available. I use a program called Evaer, that is EVAER. You have to buy it once and you can use it on any computer possible. And it has a video component to it as well. It doesn't work really great with Skype, but it is a Skype recorder, and you can use it in stereo as well, which is important. We'll get to that in a second. MP3 Skype recorder, Pamela. It does matter. Some of these programs are only available on PC. Some of these programs are only available on Windows and Mac, but you have to figure out which ones work with which and then go from there. Now, I will say that all of these have an option to record in stereo, and that means that your local channel will be recorded on like left or right, and then the other channel will be everything that's coming in will be recorded on the other one. Most, I think, is left is local and right is everyone else, but you'll just have to experiment with the settings in there to make sure that you are recording in stereo, so you're getting both channels, so you can at least separate something out of it. Otherwise, it's all going to be in one continuous track, and there's nothing you can do if you talk over your co-hosts or not. So that's what's important about recording in as many tracks as you can, as easily as possible.
Yeah, because we never talk over each other ever.
Never.
See,
it never happens.
Tried to even do it there.
It never happens.
Tried to do it there and it didn't work out.
I can't believe that we never do that.
But seriously, if you do have the option of recording people separate on stereo, do it, because it will save you countless hours of very, very creative editing if you could just go mute certain people. So very, very good. The last thing that we want to touch about on the recording is what we had mentioned. There can be hardware recorders. Now, we're not going to get into all of the details on this episode, but the difference is what we've been talking about right now are all various software methods. So whether it's something that Google's doing it or whether or not you're using Evair to do it on your end, these are all things that are recorded through your computer somehow. A hardware recorder is a separate device. It could also be a hardware audio interface, something that we'll touch on a little bit later. But essentially, it's a separate piece of equipment that actually does the recording for you. Now, where this becomes a little more difficult is you obviously have to get your signal to this recorder as well as to your computer if you are podcasting via Skype or something like that. If everybody's in the room, it might actually make your life a heck of a lot easier. But most people these days don't have that ability. SP and I, contrary to what we want, don't get together every week to do the show. We do live in two different countries, so we have to do it by Skype. So there would be a bit of routing involved so that you get it to your computer and to the hardware recorder.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what makes these microphones that we were recommending before so versatile, because the output is simultaneous. It is not one or the other. It's both. It's both XLR, which is the 3 prongs you see, and the USB port as well. So you can go USB into your computer and you can go XLR into a recorder. And there's various, we'll get into the recorders, but there's various different ones, Zoom, Tascam, Roland. There's a bunch of different ones on the market. You can go even advanced. I mean, if you've got $1 gazillion and you really want to get into it, you can have a rack mounted.
Come sponsor the show if you have
exactly.
$1 gazillion.
Yeah, don't buy equipment for yourself. Sponsor us. Yeah, you could get a rack mounted recorder as well that like radio stations and TV stations use, but you're literally talking tens of thousands of dollars at that point. So, but we're talking in the tens of dollars. We're talking in maybe the hundreds of dollars. So we'll get to those types of recorders in the future. I think if you're just starting out and you just want to test your toe into the water a little bit, I think you're talking one of those PC recorders you just want to start with, see where you go, because you don't want to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on stuff that is going to sit in a closet and you're just not going to use.
Yeah.
So
exactly. And the other thing to consider as well is whether you are going to be an audio or video podcast, because if you are going to be a video podcast, there is another level of complication, which is going to be recording that video. We'll talk more about that in the future, because video is a whole other can of worms and something that actually probably will need its own episode. But keep that in mind. If you are starting out, video will make things a lot more difficult. Hangouts on air may be your ticket to simplicity on that, but we'll cover more of that on a future episode, because we do know that we are trying to keep this simple here, and we're not going to dive too much into that right now
at this point. But there's more than just Hangout on Air. There's Blab or whatever. So you might find yourself in need of a good camera. Now, a lot of laptops come with phenomenal cameras these days, and you might be able to use one of those. However, the kind of podcast industry standard on cameras is the Logitech C920. It is a workhorse. It's nice 1080. It's stereo sound if you happen to get on the webcam microphone, but mostly it can sit on top of your monitor. And what's beneficial about the C920 is that you can actually mount it on a camera stick as well, or a security camera mount to the wall or something like that. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with these cameras, and there really isn't a competitor out there. You can get them on sale as cheaply as about $45, but they regularly go for about the $75 range, and they were $100 just a couple of years ago. So I'm expecting a tech refresh. I'm expecting Logitech to come out with the next generation, but this has been so successful for so many years. You just can't go wrong right now with getting a Logitech C920.
No. And doing my Canadian part, it will cost you about double up in Canada. That's how it is up here. But we'll definitely cover video more in a future episode, because like I said, I think it really does deserve an episode to itself. And we are trying to stick more to the fundamentals right now. That's what our first 6 episodes are geared towards, a little more of the building blocks.
Yep.
Really, though, that's going to take us to the end of our hardware overview for this episode. SP, you got anything else you want to throw in here?
No, that's good. I mean, again, we're trying to have fun. So we're telling you the easiest way to get that first recording out or the first few recordings out or whatever and see if you like it or not. And you not spend a lot of money. You really don't want to spend a lot of money unless you know you are going to do this for a long time. Yeah.
Exactly. Let's go ahead, though, and move into our last segment. Should we do that?
Sounds great.
Alrighty, we are here with the debut of our recurring segment, something that you're going to see make frequent appearances in Better Podcasting. This is going to be a segment called
This Week's Better Podcasting Download. So we're going to talk about something that's current in the news or something that is very important or something that we need to get to you. So it might be news. It might be something that we need to take aside in a special segment to work on. But in this particular week, what we're doing is we're talking about the great announcement that just happened since we recorded last time. And that is that Google is getting back or into, depending on who you ask, the podcasting business for the first time in a very long time. So until now, podcasting has been owned by iTunes. If you take a look at the stats that Libsyn puts out on the Feed podcast, Rob Walsh puts out podcasting stats, and once a month, they record 2 episodes a month, and every other week, basically, you get stats. 70% of the podcasts to date are downloaded by some sort of iTunes architecture. iOS, Apple owns about 70% of the downloads on podcasts. But on the other hand, and Stephen, you might know the exact stat because I don't know, but Android devices are getting to the point where they're outnumbering iOS devices. And that is where most podcasts are being consumed, in the mobile architecture. So until now, there hasn't been, and there still isn't because it's not live as we're recording this podcast, but there hasn't been a singular place to consolidate podcasts on Android, on Google, until now. Now there is. They have announced that they will be doing some sort of podcast inclusion in the Google Play environment. And they have opened up the coffers for podcasters to submit their podcasts into Google Play. But it's not all good news. It comes with a price, right, Stephen?
Yes, it does. This is going to be done a little bit different than what is called iTunes. iTunes is more of a directory service. So essentially what it's doing is it's reading your RSS feed, then it is allowing the user to subscribe and download them directly from you. Google Play is doing things a little bit different. As you know, Google has their own sort of unique taste on things sometimes, and they are often in it for themselves, let's be honest. While they do create a lot of great products that I personally like, there's a reason that they do that, and they are going to benefit from it. They are going to do more of, if you've heard of Stitcher, the Stitcher approach, where what they do is they actually download your podcast and host it themselves. So that means that you'll have to track Google Play music stats through their service instead of on your own, whatever it might be. And that's something that some podcasters like, some don't like. Personally, I think that it's great because I believe it in 2015 quarter 2, Android had 82% of the smartphone market. So it is a huge loss not having anything right now. And I think that there are a lot of really great apps, some that I have tried and I've quite liked. But it is something that Google needs to have something native, something that they've made. And I am okay with them using this approach.
Yeah, until now, the main app, I guess, for Android to consolidate podcasts has really been Stitcher. And there are several others, but Stitcher is the one that if you want access into the Android environment, there's really two things you can do. You can make your own app and get it in the Google Play Store and becomes discoverable that way. And that is a legitimate way to go. You can get on Stitcher and basically do the same thing and get in the Google architecture there. I believe Spreaker has started a Google app as well. These apps, though, have a ton of podcasts in there, and discoverability, you will hear in podcasting circles, is how to search for podcasts, right? And discoverability is always an issue. Like, okay, I want to go and listen to a podcast on The Walking Dead. So I open up the podcast app, I type in search Walking Dead, and one comes up and I start listening to it. And that's how a lot of people actually search for podcasts. Or they go into the App Store of Google Play or the App Store on iOS, and they do the same thing. And the first app they come up with, probably that's free, they download that and boom, that's what they start listening to. So there is a limitation in the Google Play Store right now. Now that Google Play has announced that they're going to come in, they haven't announced how. They just said, we want your podcast. And yes, they actually do want the podcast. As Stephen mentioned before, they're going to take your file and they're going to host it on their stuff. So in order to see how many downloads it has, you're going to have to go to the Google stats, whatever they are. We'll see what they are. I actually get my stats through my podcast through Libsyn right now. And if I host an episode on another service like Spreaker, we'll say, I'll have to go there to see how many downloads. Same with Stitcher. I have to go to Stitcher to see how many downloads are over there. Although I think there's a link back in Libsyn to Stitcher, so those stats are inclusive in Libsyn, but not all media hosts are like that. And we'll talk about media hosts later, by the way, if you're listening for your first time. But, okay, I think... Okay, let me back up a second. So you have a bunch of hobby podcasters in front of you, right? Stephen and I are hobby podcasters. Everybody on our network is a hobby podcaster. Yeah. Nobody's really making any money. You go to the disclosure statement that Google Play put out. I think the most people that are going to have problems with it are the ones that are trying to make money off their podcast, because Google is being very strict on what you can and can't do in order to make money. And it's not going to be like YouTube. There's no monetize button. You can't get into AdSense or whatever they have. And I think that's really what's bugging a lot of people. From my perspective, I just like the extra exposure. If you've got an Android device, you want to listen to a podcast, I want to be there. I want you to be able to listen to my content, which I'm not charging anybody for anyway.
No, except me. You always charge me. That's all. But
every month. Yeah, I'm waiting for that next payment, buddy.
This is something, though, that I am personally really excited about because of the fact that I have used a variety of Android apps to try to download podcasts, and the directory of services that are there, some of them are really good and you'll pretty much find anything that you're looking for. And some of them are really, really bad, where you will put in a name and it won't be in there, and it might be a podcast that's been around for years. I've had that happen. So I like the idea that there is some form of standardization platform going to be available for Android users.
Yeah, and another thing to keep in mind is that Google Play, if you're an experienced podcaster, if you're listening to us and you already have podcasts out there and you feel very comfortable and everything, and you've already maybe actually submitted your podcast to the Google Play Store, one thing to keep in mind is that Google Play actually is using different delineators than iTunes, right? So Libsyn, for instance, has started their own separate destination in Libsyn, kind of like a separate RSS feed specifically for Google Play. So it's asking for different items. Now, we'll take your regular RSS feed. It has morphed itself. Like, look, RSS is the standardization, and RSS feed for podcasts has been standardized to iTunes so far. And so Google understands that, and they're taking your RSS feed and they're morphing it into whatever formats that they need. But Libsyn has taken a step further and said, we will create a separate feed for you, a separate destination for Google Play. And I think more and more providers like Blueberry, Podbean, and stuff like that will be doing that as well to make dedicated destinations for Google Play. So just stay tuned for all of that. If you're an existing podcaster, if you're brand new, don't worry about it. Just submit your RSS feed to Google Play and see how that goes.
Like I said, I'm really excited about this, and I just can't wait to see where this all lands and what Google comes out with, because they've been so away from it for so long. you think they've got to have something good if now they feel like coming back to it.
There is a lot of excitement around here, and I just can't wait. Although, if you are concerned, I encourage you to read the terms of service, because it does actually state in there a lot of things that if you're worried about monetization, you really should take a look at what you're getting yourself into. But on the other hand, it's going to be Google, it's Android, it's the bulk of devices out there. So if you don't do it, you're limiting where you're going to be heard.
For sure. But that's going to go ahead and take us towards the end of episode 2 of Better Podcasting. Thank you very much for listening. And as usual, we would love your feedback. And you can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. Feel free to hit us up on Twitter too. It's at BetterPod. And we would love to hear what you've got to say, what questions you might have, suggestions for future shows, things like that. But just go to betterpodcasting.com. And as SP mentioned earlier, a lot of the gear that we do recommend is available to be seen at betterpodcastinggear.com. It's a separate website that we've got set up there so that you can see a lot of the products that we're talking about. So check out both of those sites there. And we once again, thank you very much for joining us today. So that does take us to the end. And I am Stephen John Drew.
And I'm Stargate Pioneer.
Bye.
See you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Better Podcasting. We want to hear from you. You can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. If you like the show, please consider giving us a 5-star review in iTunes. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next week.